On today's episode of History in Lowell, we'll be talking about Edith Nourse Rogers. Hello and welcome to History in Lowell. I'm Maritza Grooms and I'm joined by my personal professor and TV dad, Bob Forrant.
Good afternoon.
And we're here in Chelmsford Studios, beautiful studios.
Yeah,
Thank
this is
you
fantastic.
for letting us use this space.
I love the chairs.
I do. I love everything about this studio. But Bob, we're going to discuss a really complex and powerful character from history. And we're talking about a character who did and has influenced Lowell and our nation as a whole.
Yeah, she is probably, of people that I've studied that live in Lowell and worked in Lowell and whatnot, she's one of the more intriguing people. And hopefully we'll be able to explain a bit of why we think that way over the course of the next few minutes. But she doesn't really get, I feel like, her due. As often happens in Lowell with women who are in these really interesting positions in shaping global history in a way, which she does, and we'll see as we explore her life. And I mean, there is a school named after her. But I don't necessarily think when people drive by it, they think, oh yeah, that Rogers.
Absolutely
It's just
not.
Rogers School. I don't think necessarily people say Edith Nourse Rogers and then say, I wonder who she is. Why is a school named after her?
Right.
So we're going to reveal.
Let's dive into it, Bob. So Edith was born in Maine,
Yep, Bath, Maine.
Bath, Maine, to a pretty well-off family.
Yes.
And I think for the time, it was actually, a little rare that women got to be homeschooled in the way that she was.
Yeah, she's born in 1880 and she's homeschooled in Maine for 14 years. Her connection to Lowell in an odd kind of a way. Her dad is wealthy and he's a textile mill magnate in Maine.
Surprise, surprise.
And when she's 14, her parents send her to Lowell because in Lowell there's the Rogers Hall School, which is a private dormitory school, and she comes to Lowell to study.
Imagine going to school with your name on it.
Yeah, well, she's not Rogers yet. She's just Nourse, right? She's not married, so
Future.
Yeah, the future. But at any rate, that's how she ends up in Lowell. And then, as is typical of wealthy young women at the time, she goes to Paris to what's called a finishing school.
Oh, yeah, you have to learn how to be
You have to learn how to be proper. Yeah, and serve tea and do whatever you're supposed to do. And she definitely, in the rest of her life, is so far out of that mold of a finishing school that it's really quite fascinating. I'd love to find out more about what that was like for her, because fairly quickly her life changes. And the idea of a finishing school, I don't see her in that environment at all.
No, because then she goes on to, well, I'll let you tell us.
So she ultimately gets married to John Rogers, who has just graduated from Harvard Law School from a proper family in Lowell and practices law in Lowell. They get married. He runs for Congress. He runs for the House from Lowell and wins in 1912. And so from 1912 until the mid-1920s, before he passes away, he's in the House of Representatives. And that matters because during World War I, he, on occasion, goes to Europe to investigate what's happening with World War I, how the U.S. troops are faring. And Edith Nourse Rogers goes along and becomes very actively engaged in working with the Red Cross on the front line, helping to care for wounded American soldiers.
Incredible.
And talking to people. And she, early on, begins to identify people who are have trauma from war. Before we now call it post-traumatic stress disorder. Back in the day, people would have said, you're shell-shocked. And that was the expression people used. And so she was counseling people who were shell-shocked. And she spent a considerable amount of time during the war, and then after the war was over, Walter Reed Army Hospital was taking care of lots of people who had come back from the war shell-shocked or injured in some way. And she was a constant presence at the hospital, visiting people, talking to people, comforting people, and also in her way beginning to understand the plight of veterans who had come back from World War I. This is going to figure later in her life in the 1940s. But she's really, again, anything but like a finishing, what I would think, when I think of finishing school, I don't think of somebody like with blood and guts.
No, not someone who's going to go on the front lines, who's going to really dedicate their lives to helping and serving people who have also helped and served
Which she
the
did.
country.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It's pretty amazing to think about. And after a bit of time, her husband passes away in office. And so she runs for the seat.
Well, of course, because any proper lady's role is in the house.
And she becomes the first woman in all of New England to be elected to Congress.
That's incredible.
From Lowell, and then she's going to stay in Congress from the early 1930s until 1960.
Wow. So the first woman from New England gets elected, and she doesn't just go there and disappear or stay in the shadows. She still continues to put herself on the front line, so to say.
Literally and figuratively. And I ran across this in doing research and trying to find out more about her life, an incident that I had never heard of in all the time I've written about, studied, taught U.S. history. I think it's 1935, but in the mid-1930s, a young man shows up in the House of Representatives, and somehow he gets in with a pistol that he's concealed, and he jumps up on the railing in the balcony of the House, waving the pistol around and screaming that he's going to be heard. And he's upset about the Great Depression and unemployment and the slow pace at which the country's recovering, and he's brandishing this weapon, and everybody in the House
scatters,
runs for cover. Where's the door? Not her. She and one other person, a member of the House from Minnesota who had been a Marine in World War I, they stay, and they approach him, and she walks right up to him, in all the accounts I read, newspaper and other accounts, and basically starts talking to him and says, "You don't want to hurt anybody. I understand how you feel." She's using the tools from when she had been working at Walter Reed and doing all this other stuff in a prior life. And she basically gets the guy to give up the pistol to her buddy, the Marine from Minnesota, who's also in the House, and it ends without any violence or without any incident. They arrest him, put him in jail for about a month, but the House decides, because it ended the way it ended, that they basically appeal for him to be released. And he's released into a doctor's care, and that's the end of it. But she, again, is sort of no hideaway person.
Definitely not. Courageous for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine it.
No.
You think of January 6th, which was really horrific, right? And everybody was hiding and cowering. But in this case, there's somebody waving a pistol in front of her, and she says, "Yeah, I can deal with this."
Yeah.
Jumps right in.
I can't even imagine it today. De-escalation. She already has an understanding of trauma.
Yep.
Almost kind of also taking responsibility for the state that the country's in.
Yep.
Right? I can be understanding as to why you might be upset, sir.
Very cool. I mean, I was struck by that as, again, an example of her pushing back against the norm at the time.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a rebel.
Yeah. Person after my own heart.
Same. So as things continue, we know we enter into another war. And it's unfortunately very resonant, as we said, history rhymes to today where we are. And there's the U.S. does this like weird dance where maybe we're not going to really get involved. And now we're going to be heroes. Yeah, we'll take some refugees, but she's involved in some way. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so sort of the backstory is that in the 1920s in the U.S., there's a powerful anti-immigrant move in the country, a broad-based movement of some intellectuals from some of the leading colleges and universities in the country who say Southern and Eastern European immigrants are intellectually and genetically inferior, and that we have to keep these folks out because it will pollute the gene pool and it will ruin the country. And along with that sort of intellectual argument comes the Ku Klux Klan, which is powerful in the 1920s, and they're leading the charge against immigration. The upshot of it is that in 1924, a restrictive quota bill gets put in place that dramatically limits how many people can come in to the country to about 150,000 annually.
I was imagining it going like...
Yeah, it goes from, we're averaging 1,750,000 a year. It goes down to about 150,000. But in particular, the quota impacts negatively Eastern European countries, and it also shrinks the number of people that can come in from any one country, so it lowers dramatically how many people can come in from Germany. In the late 1930s, Hitler is rising to power. It's obvious to the world what he's doing in terms of rounding up Jewish people, intellectuals, labor leaders, other people, putting them in concentration camps. It's common knowledge, it's not a secret what he's doing. And the quota system makes it virtually impossible for anybody trying to get asylum to come into the United States.
Which just
and so shiploads of people are coming, and they're being refused entry anywhere on the East Coast, and they're not allowed into the country. And so she steps forward in 1936, 1937 to sponsor legislation to end the quota for the duration of the war and to let Jewish refugees into the country. And what's fascinating, and so unlike the times we live in, she co-sponsors this bill. She's a champion in the House of Representatives, and she co-authors the bill with Democratic senators, so she's Republican. In the Senate, it's Robert Wagner, who's the senator from New York State, one of the most liberal people in the Senate at the time. So you have a Republican in the House and a Democrat in the Senate, and they basically lobby for changes in the quota system, let these people in, and they particularly target it toward kids.
Right.
Like relaxing the quota to let 10 or 15,000 children in a year over 1938 and 1939, which is not really a large number.
No, yeah.
Right? And people make the argument in opposition, well, how are we going to take care of them? Where are they going to live?
Right.
People come forward and say they'll take in the kids, they'll take care of them. Other people say, well, they're going to take jobs, but these are kids. What jobs are they going to take?
Yeah.
And to counter that, the American Federation of Labor, to its credit, comes forward and says, yes, we should do this. But on the other hand, lined up against them are like the Daughters of the American Revolution, the American Legion, some of these other well-known groups who basically say, well, we can't even take care of our own. Why should we be letting other people in? And Rogers is saying, no, it's in our tradition. It's in our heritage, our culture, that we should be open to helping people that are in this particular need at this particular time. But it goes nowhere. As much as they lobby for it, there's an opinion poll taken, a national opinion poll taken while the bill is being discussed, and about 70% of the people in the poll respond, no, we should not change the quota.
Wow.
We should not let people in. And so it's a blend of anti-Semitism, anti-immigration, a whole bunch of things all in an ugly ball of wax, I guess you could say. And the bill actually never gets out of committee. There's never even a vote.
Oh my God.
But again, she's put herself forward publicly and speaks around the country, goes to Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, persuades Eleanor Roosevelt, President Roosevelt's wife, and she engages her husband, you have to do this, but to no avail. And Roosevelt himself, which again is interesting because we think of him to this day as liberal, the most liberal president, the New Deal and all of that. He doesn't say word one about the bill. He remains silent. And the bill just dies in committee. And the horrors of what happens in Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, elsewhere, is, again, we kind of know what's going on, but it's obviously much more revealed toward the end of the Second World War that we failed miserably that test in the late 1930s.
How many lives could have been saved?
Yep.
She was kind of a hero without trying to be a hero, just thinking about the kids in general.
Yes.
And what horrors war can bring about for them. But on top of that, now we know what we know. Horrors beyond anything one could imagine.
Oh yeah, no, she's a profile in courage in the way that she tries to do the proper thing. So again, I'm fascinated by and interested in what made her tick. And I do think that having been on the front line of World War I and seeing the horrors that she saw made her maybe more cognizant of what fate we were resigning people to if we didn't allow more people in, that she had some kind of empathy that a lot of other people obviously around her in the House and Senate didn't have.
She doesn't let her politics impact her humanity.
Yep. And again, that people could work across the aisle.
Unheard of.
Yes, we don't see that now.
No, but she continues to push and work across the aisle, and she wants to help people no matter, she does whatever she can to help those. So then she puts forth another bill.
Yeah, she is instrumental. So in 1943, early 1944, the tide of war begins to turn, and it looks like the Allies, including the U.S., are going to be successful. And people in the country are concerned that, okay, what happens when the war is over and everybody in uniform, like my dad, comes back and wants their job back, and all the war production that got American industry going again in 1941, 42, that scooped up all the unemployed and dramatically lowered the unemployment rate that the country had been suffering in the Great Depression. When all that happens, are we going to end up back in the Great Depression?
Right.
Because we've not really, in the 30s, as much as the New Deal legislation has stemmed the blood loss, if you will, the economy hasn't really turned around until war. And several million people end up in uniform, and we're making boats and planes and trains and jeeps and trucks and weapons, right? So she and others, but she takes the lead, she's one of the lead people on this, essentially say we need to craft something.
Yeah.
We need to try to figure out how do we postpone people coming back into the labor movement, looking for work, and how can we sort of re-energize and re-inspire the innovation in the American economy that had gone on even way back before even World War I.
Right.
How do we get the mojo back, if you will, right?
Get our engines revving again.
Yeah, and how do we do that in such a way that we don't tumble the economy into another great, if not a Great Depression, a long-term recession that would bring the unemployment rate back up to 12, 15%. And
different kind of shell shock.
Yeah, a dramatic one, right? So in the House and Senate, people put a bill together, and she's one of the writers, thinkers of the bill that we know of today as the GI Bill, to attack these problems. And so again, she's like this really interesting character.
Yeah, she is.
Again, in one of these really interesting moments in history, she's on the, a woman from Lowell in the House on the front line.
On the front line. And this bill itself does actually give us a boon for the economy.
It works.
And it creates what we know today is the middle class. It provides jobs, but it also provides education and training. And before people go back to jobs, they were able to collect unemployment for a little while, which was huge because then it allows people to resettle and build their families, connect with families. I was also thinking about the women in wartime and how this impacts them a little bit because they went from having jobs to maybe not having jobs, but there's a whole different thing to go into when we talk about the middle class.
Yeah, you had a shirt.
Exactly, and my little bandana.
Yeah, I remember.
So check out that episode.
Yeah,
but it's incredible what this bill is able to do for families.
Right. So she again, she and the other people are really profoundly interested in trying to figure this out. And so ingeniously, genius, I don't know, is it ingenious? Yeah, ingenious is if you're clever. They say, well, what if we give anybody in uniform coming back the opportunity to go to college or to a technical school or training program if they want to? And if we do that, their thinking is that will postpone them going out and looking for a job.
Right.
So the people that don't want to do that, that just want to come back and work and get on with their lives, if we can push several million people into postponing labor force reentry, we keep some jobs open. So that's one piece of the bill.
Right.
The second major piece of the bill is to say, okay, well, what are people going to need when they come back? One of the things that people focus on is housing.
Right.
And so within the bill comes legislation to make it easy for particularly working class people, people like my dad at the time, who come back from the war. He shortly after he comes back gets married, wants to start a family. Pretty much I'm the apple of my mom and dad's eye, and they want to buy a house. He's a butcher at a grocery store.
Wow.
Doesn't have the money for a down payment for anything that normally a bank would require. In the GI Bill, the federal government becomes the backstop on a home loan mortgage. They'll back the mortgage at a low interest rate. And so that's how Bob ends up living in a little tiny 4-room house that grows and expands as the family grows and expands.
Wow.
But my dad gets to buy a house, as do millions of other GIs who wouldn't necessarily have had that opportunity. And so there's the double impact of that is not only then do people are able to make that kind of economic change in their lives, but it stimulates a housing boom, which puts people back to work building the houses, and also puts people back to work building the appliances and the furniture that are going to go in the houses. And so the multiplier effect of both the school part and the housing part is it does really get us that sort of the beginnings of a middle class, because the science and engineering that comes out of the heads and hands of the people who go to college that might not otherwise have gone,
Right.
and this housing boom and the construction and the putting people back to work, and this is when GE and Westinghouse start building TVs and radios and washing machines and dishwashers and
then we can sell you all our appliances that are new, like vacuum cleaners and
all of that, right?
microwaves.
And so that basically, so again, the genius of Edith Nourse Rogers and the people that craft the bill, there's an amazing photo that I found in doing the research. So when so the bill goes through Congress, has to be passed, House and Senate, because it's legislation with spending. It has to go through the steps, and then Roosevelt signs it into law. And the day that he signs it into law, around him in the Oval Office are the group of people responsible for writing the bill. And right over his shoulder is her.
That's right. That's our girl.
And he signed, like as presidents did in those days, he signs maybe like 3 letters of his name, and he takes the pen and turns around and hands it to her.
Wow.
So she gets the first signing pen from Roosevelt. And so I know some people who are like distant relatives of her, and I called them. I said, any of you dudes know where the pen is?
Come on.
Because I want a picture of I want like to hold the pen. Nobody knows where the pen is.
Of course.
So if you're out there in TV land and you're hearing me, if you have Edith Nourse Rogers' pen from signing the GI Bill, please call me.
We need it.
We need the pen.
Wow. Our proper little lady.
Yes.
Who grew up kind of in Lowell, was raised in Lowell, is honored at least by the STEM Academy in Lowell, got to be the first signature after FDR to really to have a lasting impact on not just the U.S. but globally, like you said.
In the Bedford hospital, military hospital,
Wow.
is named for her as well.
And who knows, like, what other work with veterans that could have been the foundation that she laid.
I mean, she also put into law legislation to start having a women's corps in the military.
Get out of here.
As another thing that she did in the early 40s, yeah.
Wow.
She was the motivator, the impetus behind, so that women just could be on the front line and could be in the military, something our current administration doesn't want. She's responsible for crafting the legislation to make that happen as well. So I mean, in all these different ways, she's a real interesting kind of a path breaker.
Yeah.
And again, sort of, for me, what surprises me is there's no biography.
How?
I don't understand how some historian has not encouraged a grad student getting a PhD to write a biography of this person. And all her papers are at Radcliffe in the library.
So they're right there.
It
could be done.
Yeah.
So maybe you just have to handpick one of your...
Yeah, I'm too old to start a doctoral dissertation supervision again, but because it takes 5 years. I don't want to do that.
Just whisper in someone else's ear.
But yeah, that her life hasn't been explored more. I'm toying with the idea of writing like a kind of an academic article that I could try to get in a journal somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've accumulated so much information as I've tried to delve more into her life. I feel like I know her pretty well at this point.
Yeah.
And there's more to learn for sure. But she stays in office until 1960.
Wow.
She dies while she's running for office in 1960 to run again. And Bradford Morse is the person who succeeds her.
A dedicated, lifelong servant.
Yeah, so she's really a profile in courage in a way for all these different, just walking up to the dude with the gun, that by itself.
And just being such a compassionate, empathetic human who can see the impacts of these major decisions that these legislators are making, and to go and say, okay, we need to do something about when they come home. We need to take care of our people when they come home. We need to take care of the people who are going in. We need to make a space for people like me, women, who can make change. Mm-hmm. She is very complex and dynamic, and a profile in courage. And of course, we don't have a lot of time to go into it, literally no time at all, but it's not just one and done, right? There's always other implications and unintended impacts of things, but maybe that's for our future episode.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
We'll just leave that on the table.
Suspense. And thank you all for tuning in. This has been History in Lowell.